Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. The season 2 update here in Warzone 2 definitely changed a good amount of things when it comes to, content. Obviously we have resurgence now, but also the meta saw a decent sized update as well. They buffed and nerfed several different main meta weapons. We also got the addition of 2 new weapons. So today we are breaking down the new meta update here in Warzone 2. So of course we are on our tier list, which we haven't really visited in quite some time because there just hasn't been any tuning updates or weapon updates before season 2 for like a month and a half, it seemed like. But there's a lot we got to go through and actually update here. I've got my handy dandy list of all the changes that were made, and we're going to update things accordingly. So first up, we of course have to start off with our 2 new weapons. I've used each of these a decent amount of gameplay to see how exactly they stack up. Initially here, the KV broadside, I'm not gonna lie, I don't feel like is that much better than the other shotguns. All the shotguns in Warzone right now feel very underwhelming because they just are not super powerful. They're good within like 7 meters, but that's where a shotgun's supposed to be good. So like it's not really anything crazy. And then outside of that, they're completely obsolete. None of them can one-shot knock a player with full armor, which now with the 3-plate vest being the default thing, they're just not super great. That said, I think the KV broadside is the most consistent shotgun out of all of them, just because you can spam it, but it's not anything crazy. I think it's an average gun and an average shotgun at best. Better choice out of all of them, but nothing that's going to break the meta by any means. Great close range, good for pushing buildings. That's about it. The Hemlock, on the other hand, I think is more so competitive than anything else, and this could change over time. I don't think it's necessarily like the best competitive rifle here by any means, but its rate of fire, its range, not necessarily the most friendly, if you will. When we have other rifles like the M13, the M4, the Chimera, obviously the TAC 56, the Kastov, these are all weapons that are very reliable at multiple ranges. Really, to me, the Hemlock is a mid-range gun at best, and with the setups that we've talked about already, I've already of course gone through and broken down loadouts for both the new weapons. It's just not something that I feel like is crazy good, but it certainly is capable of competing in multiple different types of gunfights. Primarily though, close to mid-range is where it's going to thrive. Then we get into all of our weapon changes here. So I'm going to be referencing our list of notes here from the patch notes. Obviously the M13 got a buff for damage, and this is an important one because it actually is now better than ever, and it was already the second best rifle over range in terms of TTK before the update, just behind the 7.62. And I'm going to say straight up, I think the M13B is now in the meta conversation, especially for the rifle category in specific, but just overall, I've been using this post update and it feels so much stronger, so much more consistent. It's been frying. It's already super low recoil, so M13 is one of the top options I think in the game right now. Now the Kastov 7.62 actually saw a nerf for its range, then also its damage. Kind of surprised that they went after the 7.62 so much, considering the RPK, the RAL, those are 2 just long range beasts, and obviously the RPK got some changes that we'll get to here in the future in just a moment. But the Kastov really did catch a decent nerf with this, so I don't think again it's gonna drop necessarily all the way down to competitive or top tier, but really what this update has done, and this will be reflected I think by the time we've gone through all these weapons, is made this absolute meta category much closer in line with top tier. Before this update, obviously the Fennec, the RPK, the RAL, the TAC V, they were absolute meta, and they were absolute meta by a large gap. Right now, instead of being a huge gap, it's a much smaller gap where top tier and competitive have a much better chance at potentially competing with absolute meta. So I'm going to keep the 7.62 there for now, but it's not something that is going to be ridiculously crazy. There were a couple of interesting updates to some of the rifles. The Lockman 5.56 and the M4 both got rate of fire increases for their semi-auto versions. That doesn't really change how these guns are. They're still going to be in competitive and top tier respectively. Now a lot of the marksman rifles got some very interesting changes, ones that I wasn't really expecting. The 7.62 got buffs and nerfs for some of its damage ranges, and then also its straight up damage. So some things were adjusted in a better way, some things got hurt, and so I think that balances it out. They're just making the gun feel a bit different now. I don't think the Lockman 7.62 is going to be something that many players are still going to turn towards, just because semi-auto, it's got that larger skill gap. The full auto version of it is not crazy, so we're just going to keep that that in average. The FTAC Recon also got buffs and nerfs for its damages and ranges. It also got an ADS buff, so like it's going to be a bit more aggressive now for multiplayer. I think it makes it a bit better, but for Warzone here, which obviously is where this list is based, staying in average as well. And same deal with the SO14. This got a range buff and a headshot nerf. It still though has the worst TTK out of the battle rifles, so nothing crazy going on there. The interesting one here is the TAC V. They nerfed the damage hard here, and when I was testing this out, it felt noticeable. I was so used to the TAC V just frying, especially in the mid-range. When I picked this up, I was not enjoying it all that much. So TAC V here, I'm gonna say it's gonna drop down into top tier. I think though it might be trending towards competitive as we start to see, you know, the rest of the season shape out and see how other things are adjusted. Now, another interesting nerf, the X13 auto. Here's where I'm kind of torn, because they actually nerfed the akimbo version of this, so it's not going to be nearly as dominant as it was before. What I think is extra peculiar is that they didn't nerf the akimbo basilisk or the magnums. They didn't nerf the akimbo P890. They didn't nerf the base X12, which is ridiculous. So it's the only pistol that saw a significant nerf, but they also ended up buffing the single version of it. So if you're just using one X13 auto, it's going to actually be better than before. If you're using akimbo, it's worse than before. So I feel like most people are probably not going to be using a single X13. I feel like that's enough to drop it down into average with these other pistols. That said, I feel like I have to move the X12 up into competitive because it's so good as a single pistol. I outgun players all the time with my ground loot one, which is just ridiculous. I also think the basilisk with the akimbo, just because it can like two-shot basically, is something that's competitive currently, even though it wasn't directly touched with this update. And by the way, as we are going through all these buffs, changes, nerfs, everything like that, every single day I got you covered with all things going on in COD. We're of course going to be covering the best loadouts and setups for all the main meta weapons here in the coming days, for Resurgence, for General Warzone, for multiplayer as well. So if you guys want to stay up to date with that stuff alongside everything else going on in COD, be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on those post notifications, and if you guys enjoy the video, let me know by dropping a like on it as well. And of course, with season 2, I would not be able to be grinding all day every day trying to test out weapons, get the latest info out for you guys, leveling up guns and whatnot, if it weren't for my gamer advantage glasses. These things are literal game changers. I got them on all day every day. I don't get headaches when I wear them, which is great because of course I'm looking at screens all day. So if you're, you know, doing work, school, or playing games and are always looking at screens, you got to get yourself a pair. Gonna help you sleep better at night as well, so you can wake up feeling nice and refreshed the next day. If you want to cop a pair, code WhosImmortal gets you a nice little discount at checkout. Link for that will be down in the description below. Now here's one of the larger nerfs that we got. The RPK got a range and a damage nerf. It also got an ADS nerf for strafe and speed, but the nerf was not significant enough to completely take it out of the meta conversation. It is now no longer the #1 clear, far and away choice for the best gun in the game, but it's still a top tier meta option. Absolutely, it's going to stay in this category, but again, like I mentioned, the gap's not this big anymore, it's this big. So it's going to be more competitive with these other choices, but it's not going to be super dominant like it was before. So that's a good nerf. I'm surprised it wasn't nerfed more though, and maybe that extra nerf comes in the future, if you will. The RAL also got a slight nerf. They nerfed the recoil on it. You can just change the setup to have more recoil control though, and it's still the best TTK over range. The thing is absolutely dominant, still in the meta conversation. The EBR, curiously enough, ended up getting some changes here. It got a range nerf, but a damage buff. I think it's already a competitive option. It has a really good shot to kill ratio in this game, even with 3 plates, but it's still going to be harder to use for most players, so I'm going to keep it in competitive. The LMS got a nerf basically because it has that minimum armor damage now. Gonna stay in average. It's not anything crazy. The fire rate kind of sucks, frankly. The TAC M, surprisingly, also got a change here. The rate of fire was buffed, and that's solid because the rate of fire on the TAC M was garbage. However, it also got a damage buff too, which to me kind of makes this a competitive choice now. It is tricky to use because it is still slower firing compared to some other choices. You can't spam it as much, but its damage is pretty ridiculous, and the fact that it got buffed to me makes it seem a lot more viable and practical in the actual meta conversation, so definitely gets a nod up to competitive. There were also some really interesting changes to some of the SMGs actually. The Vosnev got a range nerf, so it's not going to be as good for like sniper support, but close range it's still going to be really good, and its close range TTK was already right up there with the Fenix before this update, so Vosnev stays in top tier, but it's not going to be as versatile as it was before. The mini buck, this is one that surprises me the most. I have it in competitive. It got nerfed, guys, but I'm jumping this up to the top tier because I was using it a ton after the update and I was frying. the mini Bach might be one of my new favorite subs. I won't lie. It got a damage and a range nerf to some of the extremities, so certain body shots are going to do less, and its range is not going to be as good. But if you're hitting, you know, headshots, upper chest shots, torso shots, it's still going to be ridiculously good, and its damage per mag is the best out of the SMGs because it has that huge magazine. I'm loving it right now, so definitely one that I've got my eye on. The Fennec also got a decent damage nerf. I do think it's enough to drop it down into the top tier category because I think all the SMGs now are basically going to be hyper competitive, if you will. The Lockman is a great choice. The Fennec is still usable. It's just not going to fry like it once did in that magazine and that rate of fire. They don't go together super well. That, you know, damage per mag kind of sucks, and now it's going to be worse than it was before. But Mini Bach is great. Voznev is great. The Chimera and the 74U are still also fantastic for close range. So that area is just super competitive right now. Then also the Signal, our final update here. Signal 50 actually got a speed nerf, a velocity nerf, and a range nerf, basically just lining it up even more with the other snipes. And frankly, because of the update that ended up giving us 3 plates by default, not allowing snipers to ever one-shot kill unless a player's already weak, I think the Victus drops down into competitive with the other snipes, and so does the Signal. Snipers right now just don't really have a spot in the meta, which is a bit unfortunate, but that's kind of the way that things have played out. I also want to make a couple of other adjustments here real quick. The Sakin, I think, is a top tier choice. We've already looked at the TTK for this, and it absolutely can hold its own. And with that said, that's pretty much how the meta is playing out right now. I mean, very diverse. Like I said multiple times, the top meta category, absolute meta, is much closer in line with top tier and competitive than it was before season 2. And while we still have a few weapons that I think stand out, it is very possible that you could drop in with a Chimera, with an M4, with a Sakin, even with some of the competitive options here too. The Lockman, the STB, and do well against an RPK or a Kastov 762, which is great news. We are trending in the right direction. I think there needs to be more adjustments, and I'm sure there will be in the coming weeks, but as of right now, this is how the meta update shakes out. That's gonna wrap things up. If you guys enjoyed the video, let me know by dropping a like on it, and if you're new here, feel free to hit that sub button, turn on those post notifications so you can always stay up to date with everything going on in COD. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.